afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Stock Market Today. It's Alyssa Corman, Justin Nielsen here. We're going to break down the action for the major indexes. Some interesting movement among the major indexes. We'll break that down, and we're also going to take a look at a couple of names underneath the surface, some actionable opportunities. Justin, what do you have for us?
So today's episode is sponsored by the letter S. We're going to look at Steel Dynamics, STLD, also Signature Bank, SBNY, and round it up with Skyworks Solutions, SWKS.
Always love when that happens. It's always fun.
Right.
Let's take a look at the Nasdaq gaining about 0.9% for the day. We also had the S&P 500 up 0.2%. The Dow down 0.2%, and the Russell 2000 tracking small caps up 1%, Justin. So notable strength in small caps as well as the Nasdaq today. So what do you think about the action?
Well, I mean, if you look at the Nasdaq Composite, I mean, this almost looks like a classic breakout, that you would see from a stock, but this is happening on the index. And a lot of people ask, is it okay to be trading off of a base pattern that happens in an index? And the truth is we're usually getting in earlier because of our follow-through day signal. We had that follow-through day signal much earlier on the Nasdaq and even earlier on the S&P 500 and Dow Jones industrial average. For the Nasdaq, it was back on the 31st of March, so that's a much better entry, for an index. And again, we can do that using that follow-through day signal. We don't have to wait for that right side to be completed. But that being said, it's still a good thing to see. That's still the mass psychology out in play, and you're seeing that. And this is good action. We're getting to new high territory. Things are looking good. We're staying above that 14,000 level on the Nasdaq Composite. Interestingly enough, whereas a lot of times the Nasdaq 100, which is what the QQQ follows, the ETF, or if you're using MarketSmith, you can use 0NDQ, not the C, just the 0NDQ. That was not up as much today. So just a little bit, we've seen a little bit of a outperformance of the composite lately, whereas the Nasdaq 100 was kind of coming up as a more strength there, because a lot of the larger heavyweights like your Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, all of those were really driving forward the movement in the Nasdaq Composite. So the Nasdaq 100 was seeing more action there, but now the Nasdaq Composite is coming on. Meanwhile, as you mentioned, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, that was down for the day. So the Dow Jones and S&P 500, which were both kind of your stars a few weeks ago, while the Nasdaq Composite was still trading below its 50-day moving average line. Now those have kind of and again, the S&P 500 was still up a decent amount. It was up 0.2, but compared to the Nasdaq Composite being up almost a full percent, it's certainly showing a little bit more strength on the technology side. But look, I was looking at the select spider funds, XLB, XLE. Those were still, the higher ones above XLK. So XLB is the materials, XLE is energy, XLK is technology. XLF, the financials, was up there higher, but it kind of pulled back, during the day. And we'll get to that when we get into Signature Bank.
Yeah, so a lot of interesting setups underneath the surface. And we talked how last week there was a lot of turbulence, but it allowed for a lot of these new setups to develop.
Right.
So let's take a look at some of these stocks. STLD, Steel Dynamics, in the steel group. A strong move today, Justin, has earnings out of the way, but heavy volume on this breakout of a short consolidation here, gaining over 5% in that heavy volume.
Yes, and so this is something that we put on Swing Trader this morning, and we were talking about it on IBD Live. Stepping back to the weekly chart on this, you can see a 4 weeks tight. We discussed, is this okay for a position trade? And personally, for position trades, it's always better to be getting things out of the base, and we usually look at these tight areas as follow-on entries. But look, if you're looking to get into something, you can do these shelves or flat areas. Again, it's not quite long enough to be a flat base. We don't have enough weeks, but that is really tight action, and that's compelling in the way that it broke out today on volume. That's been a missing component in a lot of these stocks. So the fact that it had that heavy volume Chris Gessel and I, our chief content officer, we were actually talking earlier about seeing a lot of option activity in this early in the morning as well. So a lot of things that were looking good. And again, this is a group that has been very strong. XLB, the materials spider select fund, that one was top notch today, in terms of performance. But if you look underneath the surface, XME, which kind of breaks it down a little bit more into your metals and your miners, that was up even stronger. And then you have, the steel stocks. I mean, there were just a number of them today. So that's definitely where a lot of the strength was in the materials.
So if you missed Steel Dynamics today, what should you be looking for? Should you be looking elsewhere in this group? Should you be waiting for a new setup with STLD? How would you treat that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit out of there, especially because you want to get those breakouts from a tight area as close as possible. But the strength here should not be ignored. And that's something that is really important to be taking note of. And again, this is not alone, because we have MT, ArcelorMittal on leaderboard. You've got NUE, Nucor. There's just a whole host of them that have been setting up recently. And so as you see these set up all in the same group, you just have to keep your eye kind of which one's going first, which one's going next, the ones that look the strongest, the most volume coming in, all of those things. So you could be playing others in this space. We also talked on IBD Live about, just going with the steel ETF, SLX. That's another option that had a lot of outperformance today as well. That was up, I think, what, 3%? Yeah. So
yeah. And setting those alerts in MarketSmith can be very helpful. So we always talk about having that weekend routine, screening stocks, building your watch list, so you're not caught by surprise when these moves happen.
And the thing is, the alerts, they just draw your attention to something that you already, had pointed out as something you wanted to keep an eye on. But so much happens during the day. It's really nice when you have an alert kind of pointing your direction of where you need to focus.
Yes, and regional banks are continuing to show strength. So let's check in on SBNY, Signature Bank, following up a big move last week. Another gain today, up 6%, slightly above average volume. And last week, it had a strong move around its earnings report.
Right. So it had that strong move, and then it consolidated for a few days. And so sometimes you can pick these up after they, kind of consolidated a big move, and then they look like they're moving again. Now, you might look at the volume today and say, oh, well, it was just about average. For a lot of stocks, that's actually great, because they've been, showing these moves on below average volume. So this one, was just average volume, but I would look at that earlier volume spike as, hey, there's evidence that there's some involvement here. You had quite a bit of institutional involvement off of that earnings report, that strong volume that came in on that big move, and now you were able to retain that big move and now move higher and follow up on it. So again, this is another area where we've just seen a lot of the regional banks look very good. We put KRE, which is the regional bank ETF, on Swing Trader last week. Leaderboard put on the triple leveraged, that's DPST. They put that on today. So this is just an area of strength that we've seen. Now, it did pull back today. So as strong as a lot of these stocks were, they were well off their highs today. But this is still an area that we're seeing a lot of strength in. And the good news is a lot of the earnings are behind you on a lot of these stocks at this point.
Exactly right. Okay, well, now let's look at Skyworks, SWKS. Now, this stock does not have earnings out of the way for it.
It does not.
In just 3 days' time, but it's looking pretty interesting ahead of the report, clearing this consolidation here, Justin, just over the 195 area. And it closed just under that round number of 200. But we have earnings in 3 days. So what is one to do?
Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of put this lesson out there. So I actually bought this one on the 14th, I think, that red day that reversed. If you just point that out real quick, Yeah, right there. It looked like, hey, it's coming out of this area. I bought
Mhm.
it on that day. It reversed. I ended up getting shaken out. It was one of those things where it looks like it was coming back to the 50-day. And sure, it got support there. But I was looking at the potential of failed breakout. A lot of my stocks just seemed like the breakouts were failing. And so that was just making me a little nervous.
Mhm.
I pulled out of this one, and here we are. Now it's right back up. And earnings, that's the only reason why I didn't buy it. On Friday,
Right.
actually, I was looking at that, gap up, and today a good follow-up move, lots of volume. So that's something that really distinguishes this move from that previous move. Where there just wasn't much volume when it broke out on the 14th and ended up failing. But there's been a lot of volume on this one. And granted, you've got some news here too. You've got not only is this earnings coming up on Thursday after the close, Apple, who's a big
Right.
provider, Apple earnings are coming up. And they just had this recent deal with Silicon Labs where they're taking one of their arms of one of their divisions off their hands. And, a lot of people are looking at this as something that could, diversify their diversify away from Apple, because a lot of times, it was kind of, they were really dependent upon Apple for their earnings. And if Apple didn't go so hot, then Skyworks would suffer a lot of times. But with this division that they're buying in automotive, hey, that they might be spreading out a little bit, kind of getting that reliance away from Apple. And that, I think, might have been one of the reasons why I think, what was it, UBS adjusted their price target today. So you've got some upgrades there. So in terms of what you do with this one, look, you can still give this a flyer. I think I would have preferred Friday as a buy. You want to get that cushion ahead of earnings, or this is one that you just keep on your radar. There's so many stocks in the chip area, the semiconductors. In fact, SMH, that's one that we've been talking about in terms of another ETF,
Mhm.
because we've just been seeing a lot of strength there. And you saw that today. There's a big chip shortage. That's one of the things that's kind of coming into play here. But that was a breakout. So if you don't want to get into Skyworks, you can always play SMH or one of the ETFs that cover the semiconductors as an alternative, because there definitely is strength in that area.
That's exactly right. It
And SMH
seems
sticks with our
like,
theme of S. It's still an
yeah,
S,
there you
right? So
go. It seems like no matter where you look now, there's an ETF for almost any theme. And Justin, we really appreciate you breaking down the different ways to handle those, in addition to these individual stocks that are those leaders in the group. Or, if you are seeing some interesting action, but those leaders are extended, that is definitely a good reason to look at some of these ETFs too, in addition to not having that single stock risk.
especially
All
with
right,
earnings coming around.
oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
It's a huge week for earnings. So we're going to stay on top of all that. So we hope you watch IBD Live tomorrow morning, where we're going to be sharing our screens, talking about actionable ideas, some of these earnings reactions. The reports are already coming in or soon to be coming in for a number of interesting stocks tonight, Tesla among them. So we'll be keeping tabs on all that throughout the week. So tune into IBD Live, investors.com/IBD Live for more in-depth discussions about trade ideas. And we will see you right back here tomorrow. Thanks for watching.